All right, Dr. Justice, thanks so much for being a guest on Wicked Smart Golf. Really, really excited for this interview with you.
I'm so delighted to be here. I'm glad I had a few minutes to kind of catch up with you and listen to your wonderful story. So it's always good to, I consider you a peer. We're both in the mental, sports coaching business. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And guys, just if you guys are watching the video here, this is his book. Absolutely love it. We're going to go into it today. And I know you've written several books. So before we kind of get into it, the biggest thing that I think, like within the first few sections of the book that I love that you talked about is that golf is 93% mental. And I thought that was like, when you think about it, it's like Jack Nicklaus always said, golf's 90% mental, 10% physical. Like you hear these numbers, but you don't really like think about it. And so can you kind of like how did you come upon that number, and what was it when you were like, you made that revelation? You're like, wow, people really need to start working on the mental game.
Yeah. So I think at first it started anecdotally. I speak a lot. I speak to high school, college teams, conferences, and those kinds of things, lots of golf audiences. And really one of the first questions I ask is, how much percentage of golf do you think is mental? And I found that the better the player, the higher that number was. And that was an accidental kind of a thing. I didn't really. I was just trying to sort of set the tone of the dialogue. In the GYRA system, as you know, we track shots. And we've tracked. And at that point, when I wrote that book, which was 2017, 2018, I believe, I think we had only tracked close to 3,000 or 4,000 shots. And by that, I mean, we actually interviewed people who filled those scorecards out after their round. And we looked at shots that they hit and per shot and say, okay, how present were you? How not present were you? And our definition of that, we basically gave everybody a very simple definition, which is we define present as, while you were over the ball, the target or your intention of what you wanted to do with that shot was crystal clear. There was no mind wandering. And, the number that people said that was the case. In other words, while they were over the ball, all they thought about was sending the ball there, whatever there was, the fairway, the green, the hole, the landing spot for a chip. That number was right around 5, 6, 7%, which then says, oh my gosh, it was so extremely low that it was a surprise, again, to be completely honest. I do think, however, that the higher handicapper you are, then technique does come into play. And going to your PGA professional or people like you who are golfers, I'm not a golfer, and getting basic lessons, grip posture, where the ball is, and and just especially short game shots. Like I feel like you can have endless lessons on short game shots because it's such a amazing place to be creative because the lies are always different, the angles and where the pin is and the grain and those kinds of things. So I don't mean to diminish the value of technique. I just think that whatever technique you have, even with that technique, so irrespective of your handicap, the king is always, when I'm over the ball, am I thinking about this shot that I have to execute, or the 1-3 holes ago where I duffed it, or I pulled it, or I hooked it, or the putt that I missed, or the fact that I'm 5 over, or whatever the distracting thought is, or after this round I got to go buy something for my kids, or whatever the case may be. Our brain is just so noisy right now that at this point, 5-6 years after that book came out, I think that 93% is low. I think it's actually higher, but I haven't measured it.
Yeah, and you talked about too, just like how we're just not hitting the golf ball very much when you're actually out there and around a golf. Like you're just not spending much time. Most of it is in between shots. You're waiting on tee boxes. You're waiting for somebody to putt. So that's your mind, and that's just constantly running. And like you said, it's forecasting. It has negative outcomes, has positive ones, but it's always running. And it's like that's the reason really why I started Wicked Smart Golf, is because I'm like, this thing is in our control, but we talked about before we hit record, we just don't really know how to use it. And so that's why when I started getting into personal development, I started learning about new things and new techniques. And then I read a book like yours, and I thought I had a pretty good grasp on the mental game. And I read your book and I binged it 24 hours. Like I said, I pretty much killed the highlighter because I just felt like I was highlighting every word because it really spoke to me because I'm a +2 handicap. I've played at every level from the worst golf in the 120s to Q school as an AM and played in 200 plus days of tournament golf. And I still felt like there was so much to learn about the mental game. And so that's why it was like, really spoke to me, and we'll get into kind of how I've been using it and how other golfers can. But that's when I was just like, I hope golfers can understand that you can always work on your swing, but you can always work on your mental game too, because it runs you on and off the golf course.
Yeah, absolutely. And life is that way. Who we are off the golf course is essentially who we take to the golf course. And so you and I spoke earlier, and the comment I made was I really believe it's tragic that all of us human beings right now, irrespective of your age, we've been through elementary school, middle school, high school, college. We've worked somewhere. We've been trained of that. We have access to a gazillion YouTube and sources of information. Yet most of us still cannot describe our brains. We still don't know how it works. And that's tragic. I mean, the one thing that you use every single moment, matter of fact, even when you're sleeping, we really don't know anything about. And I'm on a mission, frankly, to go change that. I do believe that golfers are a subset of human beings. And as a human race, we are all living a condition that is brand new to us. I don't know that there's ever been another group of human beings that have walked planet Earth that have been exposed to this much cognitive stimuli as we do now. And if you think of food, if you're food eating or binging constantly nonstop, that's, a fast ticket to diabetes and all kinds of sort of illness. And essentially that's what we're doing with stimuli. We are just feeding our brain nonstop stimuli, and most of it isn't even positive because we're not necessarily choosing it per se. It just shows up kind of thing. You get a text message, you get an email, you go to social media, and we're at the mercy of whatever shows up. And so we're just not healthy mentally as people. We are living in a mental health crisis. And if you're a junior, so I have a daughter that's 19, she's a sophomore in college. I have a son that is 17, he's a senior in high school, getting ready to go play college golf next year in the fall. And so, as a dad of kids that age, I know tons of kids of their ages because that's who we tend to hang out with. And my goodness, you just can't run into a family, a friend, a cousin, a nephew, a niece that, isn't struggling, doesn't have someone in their family that sort of isn't struggling with this. And, I think to be good at golf, there's a double benefit. Yeah, if you work on the mental game, yes, you become good at golf. But if you really invest and if your only motivation is let me be good at golf, then there is a byproduct benefit, which is if you can learn how to recover from a bad shot, well, then you can recover from a bad situation in life. Someone cuts you off or your food comes out wrong. How do you react to that? Do you want to yell at the server or do all those kinds of negative things on the golf course? If you do that in real life, then on the golf course, you're likely to throw your club and now your next few holes are kind of shot. And, watching my son play junior golf, I unfortunately and painfully, I see it. I see a kid who's playing so well through 14 holes, has, a double bogey and they're done. And it's almost like they don't even know what's going on at that point. They can't recognize themselves. They don't have any tools to recover from that. And if you can learn how to do that, you will learn how to do that in your life too, which is the more important game.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. And I was going to get into the acronym for your book, but you were just talking about it. And it's one of the first points that I really wrote down when reading the book is that the hardest shot in golf is the one after a bad shot. Can you explain why that is from a neuroscientist, wicked smart point of view?
Yeah. And, the other question that I've asked people is what's the hardest shot in golf? And I think most people will give me two answers. They'll say the first tee shot, which I don't disagree with. And other people will say like a 40, 50 yard bunker shot. So I get those answers a lot. And, I don't, I think they are hard shots, but they're not the hardest shot. So to me, the hardest shot from a neurological perspective is which is the shot that your brain will simply not allow you to execute what it is that you're capable of doing, right? Because the brain controls your muscles. Muscles have no memory. They have no cognitive functionality. They don't make decisions on their own. No part of your body will move without your brain telling it what to do. Think of a quadriplegic. Their brain works amazing. Their muscles work amazing. They have a spinal injury, so there's no communication, so they can't move anything in their body. So the brain does control every single neuromuscular movement, even the subconscious one. Like I'm talking to you right now and you're nodding your head. You're not consciously saying, oh, let me move my head up and down. You're just, your subconscious is reacting to the words that I'm saying, presumably because you're agreeing with me. So I found that, and this was a surprise, to be honest, again, that after a bad shot, now a bad shot, there's a scale, right? There's something that you barely miss versus something that is completely out of bounds. So I came up with that 10 scale, 1 through 10, 10 being, from what you wanted to do versus the outcome, it was so far off. And 2 or 3 being from what you wanted to do versus the outcome, it wasn't that far off. So there's a big scale. But once you cross 7, 8, 9, 10, once you get in that range, meaning what I wanted to do versus what the result was a big surprise. The brain, July 4th fireworks, basically, because I can see it that way. It's crazy. It's like the last minute of the July 4th fireworks. And so, because think about it, after that surprise, which is a really bad shot, your brain does what? How did this happen? I can't believe I did this. I had a good round going. I just gave one up. Like I can go on and on.
And then a lot of times you have to maybe hit again. Like if you do hit one maybe out of bounds, now you got to hit a provisional. And I think the provisional is one of the hardest shots in golf too, because you're like, is it out there? Is it not? Am I in? Am I out? Do I hit the same club?
Exactly.
And now you're still on the tee. Yeah.
That's my point. And when there's that much noise in your head, then there is severe competition for the neurons. So these are the little cars that travel to your neuromuscular function to swing the club. They're all vibrating much, much higher. You've lost the target because you don't even really see. You see where you want to hit the ball, but there's so much noise in your head that you can't hold it. And now you're more than likely, going to hit a poor shot, and it may take you several hours for your brain waves to come back down so that those neurons are firing at the right frequency for your muscle, so you can hold a target, so you can hit a putt with exactly the right force that you want to hit it at. But any shot that's between 7 and 10, between what you wanted to do and what the result is, that next shot is the hardest shot in golf. And the most expensive one to recover from, Michael, is not even an OB shot. You're right, that is expensive. But the most expensive shot to recover from is a missed makeable putt. Like that one fires the brain more than a shank, than an out of bounds one. I wasn't expecting to find that. As a matter of fact, when I first saw that, I thought something was wrong with my machine. And then I started looking for it because I can't predict when that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so as I started to observe that, I was shocked that a short makeable putt is the most expensive shot in golf, which makes the next tee shot now the most difficult shot in golf. And to prove my point, I kid you not, watch TV at any level on any tour, go watch junior golf, go watch someone playing golf and, wait for when they miss a short putt and look at the next tee shot. There is a significantly high probability that next tee shot is going to be way offline.
I just shaking my head and nodding yes, because I know so many examples in my own game and people I've played with. That missed putt, you hit a great drive in there, or you hit a great tee shot and you get a great iron, you got yourself a very makeable putt, and then you really feel that brain starting to get very active. Sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't. So that's why I do spend a whole chapter in my book talking about getting rid of or managing expectations. Because I found that a lot of golfers have the wrong expectations, which then gets them in that missed putt mentality, like you just talked about. Like the PGA Tour average from 8 feet is only about 50%. And you think 8 feet, like, man, that's right there. I should be making these all the time. And it's like, if the best players in the world with the best coaches, the best equipment, fitted equipment on the best greens can't even make half of those putts, maybe you shouldn't either. So like going into it, I feel like with the right expectations is definitely helpful. But then it's using the tools that you talk about in your book. So when you do miss them, that you're able to get up to that next tee shot and be 100% present and not still kicking yourself over that missed putt.
Yeah, that was probably, I would say that my very humble contribution to athletics in general was, I realized very quickly that having very high brain waves or a lot of noise in your head is a human condition. So if you can just give me 1 minute and kind of follow me on this, and then I'll pause and I would welcome your thoughts on it. But first of all, let's just start with life. So in life, when we have a stressful day or a stressful event of any kind, we know that our brain waves are high. So what are typically some of the things that most of us will do? Well, maybe we go for a gym or a swim, a run. Maybe we watch a movie. Maybe we go for a walk, or sit in a hammock somewhere. And so generally speaking, we know what to do to try to calm ourselves down in normal life. We may not always do it, but yoga, mindfulness, these aren't new interventions to help us, deal with that. The problem with athletes in general, in all sports, but even with the game of golf, is that you don't have time. You can't find a hammock on the course and say, hey guys, you guys keep playing, let me go calm down and then I'll come back. And so we need something that can work very quickly. And that's where the neuroscience has really, in my opinion, revolutionized the mental game. Is, instead of using cliches like stay in the moment, don't think ahead, one shot at a time, which are really cognitive thoughts, and cognitive thoughts live in a very different part of the brain that are completely swamped or flooded with the emotional side or the sensory cortex. Our sensory cortex is non-existent pretty much when our brain waves are very high. So as an example, think of maybe a time that you left work and you were really pissed off about something and you had the radio on your favorite playlist and you had a 30-minute drive home. When you got home and I asked you, what did you listen to? You probably couldn't tell me a single song, right? It was there, it was playing, but you didn't hear any of it because your brain was processing the day and the crappy stuff that someone did to you or whatever happened. Well, it's the same thing in golf when you miss a short putt. Now you go to the next tee box, your sense of feel, like even how much you are gripping or how hard or soft that you're gripping a club or where the target is. I am very lucky enough to work with several professional tour players. And matter of fact, just a few days ago, I was with one on the Champions Tour. And I noticed that on his pre-shot routine, when he walked from his ball to the hole, so he could look at his putt from the hole backwards, he kind of looked up in the sky for a few minutes because he was walking there. And then he came back and I recorded it and I said, what were you looking at up in the sky? And it's like, I didn't know I was doing that. And I said, well, when you look up in the sky, you've just opened your sensory cortex to all kinds of stimuli, which now makes it harder for you to kind of, stay focused on the task at hand. My point is that we don't even know. A lot of us don't even know when we're in red, if you would, that our senses have shut off or severely compromised. And, if there's one simplistic way that I would love for all golfers to embrace is that golf is a target sport. The objective of golf is to send that ball there. It's not to have a perfect golf swing. It's not to have a perfect strike position or be in balance. Those are all variables. I concede that point wholeheartedly. But that's not the objective. The objective is to send the ball there. That there is a target. And because your eyes are down on the ball in the game of golf, not there, because you have to look at the ball to strike the ball, that makes holding the target the most important skill, in my opinion, to play golf. And that's why I say, that you are quote unquote committed to a shot. That your mind is not distracting. If when you're down looking at the ball, where that ball is going to go over there, whether it's a putt, a chip, a fairway, a green, it's like so clear in your mind. And that's because your sensory cortex is working beautifully. There isn't noise in your head, and you can execute that shot. But neuroscience allows us to come up with these quick neural hacks that cannot permanently change you, but that can impact you and bring those brainwaves down long enough to execute the shot. And the last point I want to make is, we have this expectation that we need to be perfect for 5 hours of the round. Right. And for 5 hours, I gotta be green, I gotta be zoned in, and you don't. It's roughly 15 minutes or less. And that's an easier ask. The time that you approach the ball, the time that you're over the ball, the time that you hit your shot is really the most important time to execute that shot. And I don't know if you're a soccer fan, but I'll pause here. But if you're a soccer fan, I can give you a very, very good analogy from what Lionel Messi does.
I'm sorry, I'm not a soccer guy. I got all my energy on golf. I was always the fat, slow kid in school, so they didn't want me on the soccer team.
But go ahead, though.
No, yeah. I mean, I just am really, really glad you started talking about just the impact of like brain waves. And I think that before, just if you could share like what the green, yellow, red system is and how were you measuring this? Because I know that we all can relate. There's those days where we would say green, which is where you're just mellow, you're calm, you're feeling good on certain shots. You might hit a bad shot, you get into yellow. You might hit a really bad shot and get into red. So I was kind of laughing when I read this because I always joked like when you hit a really bad shot, you're seeing red, just like in that sense. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this is really perfect. So can you just kind of break down the GYRA system so we can understand that more brain waves basically make it harder to function on the golf course?
Yeah, so this was an accident. Again, I was not in the business of creating a new language because we already have Zone, we already have Zen, we already have Flow. Why go create one more system? And I was not in that business at all. But, at this point, I've done over 14,000 brain scans. My peers across the world have done a lot more and a lot less. And the way that when we look at a brain, because the brain is electricity, and to look at a digital scan of the brain, the brain is actually, if you take both of your hands and kind of put them together like so, the brain looks just like that. It's 3.5 pounds and it's in the skull and it's pinkish whitish. It's not red, green, or yellow, but the colors are a universal color that we have adopted in the scientific community for something that is hot, like heat hot. It's very similar to the weather people. When there's a big storm, it's red, it's yellow. You look outside, the sky is not red, it's not yellow, but red means there's a big storm or lightning or something like that. So red is a universal color of heat, like when something is hot. It's on your kitchen stove too. So when there are two things, when the amount of thoughts that are in your head, so quantity is high, so you have lots of thoughts, and also the intensity of those thoughts, so the amplitude, like 80, 90, 100 hertz, 40, 50, then that generates heat. And heat is captured in a scan by the color red. Now, when the heat goes down in a normal brain, it looks like it's yellow because there's always some activity. And then when you're in that, proverbial zone state where you see everything's calm, it's slow, it's relaxed, and you feel like you're not even thinking about anything, that color is sort of green. The brain is not green again, but these are true sort of depictions of the brain. When your brain is green, the analogy I use is that the traffic, is very, very low. So you can get from where you are to where you want to be very quickly because there's just no traffic. So instead of cars and traffic, think of neurons. Neurons are your skills. And they travel through these roads and synapses and intersections and neural pathways and all those kinds of things. And so when there's just a lot of traffic, so when you're red, those cars can't go anywhere because there's so much noise. In addition to that, the sensory cortex gets really diminished. So muscle sequencing. So golf is a muscle sequence. You go back and then you go forward in order to generate some amount of force to strike the ball with. That's coordinated by the brain. And when those neurons are firing at a higher frequency, typically many parts of your golf swing are going to be off sequence. So you'll transition faster, your hips will go faster than you want to. You'll hit the putt harder than you want to. Your pitching wedge suddenly starts going 10 yards longer, kind of thing.
So basically throws off your motor skills and your ability to do what you know you can do on the driving range when you're nice and calm and cool and in that more green state.
Exactly.
But when you're getting stressed out and we're getting in those yellow and red. And when you're doing these scans, is this something like people are wearing, like yes, you can kind of determine?
Yeah. So the one that I used, and my team and I worked on this for many, many years, we can put it on you, and we need to stand somewhere between 8 and about 12 feet away, which to me really was the game changer, because we've been able to measure electricity in the brain for about 80, 90 years. But it's only been the last, 7, 8, 9, 10 years or so that we advanced so far along. And this came long after, even I did my work initially. But once I saw that, oh my gosh, now we can do this Bluetooth and wirelessly, I can watch somebody shoot a free throw. I can watch someone make a putt. I can watch someone write an article or solve a problem or an equation or paint or sing, and it fits. It's not a hat, but it fits around your head, and it feels like you have a hat on. So it doesn't.
And this is one you created, right?
No, I didn't create the hardware,
okay.
But we kind of souped it up, because there are these nodes, just like you can buy a car and then you can put an extra, fancy tires and wheels. So the hardware itself, is not ours, but the nodes that are in it and where they go and how they capture it. Yeah, my team and I sort of came up with that. And then that's even not the secret sauce. The secret sauce is then the software. There's so much noise in your head that we really had to figure out, you have to, it's almost like looking at the night sky, at all the stars. And if you don't know what you're looking at, it all looks like just dots out there. And so, my team and I, we wanted to look specifically at neuromuscular motor skills and coordination and communication. We wanted to see, okay, how is the brain talking to the muscles when, what kinds of stimuli cause that noise to go up? And so that's why missing a putt or those kinds of things, losing a target in your head. But red, green, yellow, because at the end of the day, I don't believe that people need to be neuroscientists or really understand the neuroscience of the brain in order to extract the learning from it. And so when I saw red, green, yellow, I think I was on my 3,000th brain scan. I mean, I'd done several thousand of them. It never really hit me until I was looking at it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's a traffic light. And so by association, I said, ooh, this is a very easy concept, because by association, people generally know what that means already. And so that's when I kind of took off on it and say, oh, I have noticed, I'm old now, dude. I think I'm old enough to be your dad. But, I find that people tend to argue about everything unless there's some scientific fact associated with it. And so I thought, okay, people can argue with zone, flow. These are philosophies. They're not necessarily wrong. But if I'm showing you a picture of a red brain and you see the intensity of the electricity in it, like, you can't argue with that, And so the adoption, the openness to learning is much, much higher. And I also find that colors, as opposed to words, are much less threatening to ourselves. Like if I say, hey, Michael, you look pissed off, or you look stressed, or you look angry. Yeah. You can be like, well, what do you mean? I'm not mad. Why are you insulting me? But red, green, yellow are, they're agnostic. I mean, they don't judge you. It's just sort of where your brain is, if you would. Kind of like a thermometer. If I were to put that on you and your temperature came at 104, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm a bad person suddenly. You'd say, oh, I have a fever. Okay, let me go rest and drink fluids and get my fever down. And I wanted people to have an agnostic view of their brain as opposed to a judgmental view of their brain. Because it's very easy to say, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm pissed off, I'm annoyed. I mean, those words, just your brain to even formulate that word in your subconscious, even in your conscious, just think of all the memories that have to be retrieved to conjure that word up, And so I realized that, giving people a non-judgmental, agnostic, almost a fun language, and make it simple for your brain. There are over 400 emotional labels: mad, glad, happy, sad, annoyed, frustrated, apprehensive, blah, blah, blah. You can go on and on. And part of the noise in our head is we have too many labels that none of us agreed to. So red, green, yellow makes it so easy and convenient because you have 3 choices and they're accurate. That's literally what your brain is. And, and so that's how we came up with that, just to make it easier for the average Joe out there to have a system to understand where their brain is and then make adjustments. If I'm red, I should know that I'm at 5%. Like, very few words that are going to come out of my mouth that are going to be good. So that's not the time I want to be arguing with my spouse or my kid. And, so it's an easy way to give the brain a labeling system that can allow you to sort of navigate the surprises of golf and of life.
Yeah, when I read your book, I instantly associated with that, because I've definitely, you hear about the zone. Everyone talks about the zone. Tiger would talk about how he just kind of like would pretty much like forget what he was doing. He would just he wouldn't even remember certain shots. He was just so in that flow state. But it is sometimes hard to kind of understand like what that is. And the green, yellow, red system really resonated with me, because it was like you recommend in your book to basically give yourself a GYR after each hole. And so that was really big for me. So it's like, let's say you're going to the first hole, you might be a little bit yellow. Maybe you didn't have a great warm up, or you're just nervous for the first shot. You hit a great shot. Maybe you go down to light yellow or green. And so kind of like having that instantly helped me out, because I'm someone that's definitely struggled with the red side and having solutions to get out of that quickly. It's like, I know these things. I've read the books, I've done the things, but for some reason, when I read your stuff, it really just was like, okay, this is simple, and I can actually think about it when I'm on the golf course, and I can apply it instantly. So as I talked about in a couple episodes, and when I read your book in August, I read it and I instantly started thinking, okay, how can I be green, yellow, or red and really monitor it? The first tournament I had was the USGA Mid-Am, 5.5 hour day, 112 degrees. We had to walk. I just came off my worst tournament round of the year, too. I actually forgot to mention that to you. So I shot, I think it was an 84, my worst round by far. And I was red that round. And I took like a week off. I was so pissed off still. Thinking about it, I'm still a little red, because I didn't know these things from your book. And so I go into that tournament and I'm thinking, of course I want to make it, right? There's only 3 spots. There's 80 guys. The odds are against you. But I'm like, let's just control what you can control today. That's what I just kept telling myself. And so I utilized some things from your book before the round, during the round, and then end up missing the playoff by 1 shot. But I mean, I was right there. And I was like, if you would have had my brain on the monitor, it was like green all day. I mean, I maybe had 1 or 2 yellow. It was the smoothest, easiest round. When you're walking in this Arizona heat, you're like cooking to death. And so to be as calm as I was, even though I didn't make it, the odds are against you to begin with, I was like, wow, this really works. 2 weeks later, I win an amateur event, shoot my lowest tournament round, 68, 71, end up winning. 2 weeks after that, I actually shot my lowest round of the year, a 66, with a lame front 9, even par, nothing special. And then I fired a 5 under par, and I was just like, man, this stuff works. And so that's why I was so excited to have you on it and share the green, yellow, red system, because you basically say in the book to have ways to understand, one, self-awareness of where you're at, and then what we can do to get out of it. So if you guys are watching on YouTube, you recommend having yellow and red cards. So these basically, as you talked about, are ways to kind of go, if you're in yellow, we can get to green. And if you're in red, maybe we can get to yellow or all the way to green. Yeah. Why is it that it's so hard to go from red to green? You talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, when your brain is red, sometimes you know that you're red, but remember, your brain is operating at maybe 5-10% functionality. So even though in your practice, in your past experiences, you have lots of memories to help you get through that, your brain cannot access them. So I find that if the only thing that you do is recognize that I'm red, then, we want to do things that can get you down very quickly. And we don't want to overuse those things, so those neurohacks. So we have a yellow card also. The yellow card, as you know, is mostly your best shots. And I tweeted about this, I think, last week or the week before, that, again, one of those accidental discoveries is that for the brain, visualizing, which everyone says is such a great thing, and generally I agree with that. So visualization is so good. But it is a lot harder, not impossible, to visualize something that hasn't happened yet. So if you're standing on a tee box or in the fairway or a putt, and you're trying to visualize something that hasn't happened yet, you might be able to do it or you might not. More than likely, you won't be able to do it, especially if you're yellow-red. But you know what's a lot easier? So that's called future visualization. It's a lot easier to do past visualization. So with that same club that you're about to hit, if it's already there written down before your round, so you don't have to search for it in your memory, it's right there in this card of yours that's in your yardage book. Oh, 5-iron, hole number 6, the Peninsula Club. Oh, yeah, suddenly that takes you to that moment, and that quickly shifts your brain. So that's a neurohack. So I don't think that we use our past success nearly as often as we can and need to, frankly. So that's
that was so big. I mean, for me, I always tell everybody, I have a whole chapter in the book, like, you got to remember your good shots, because we always love to remember all the bad things in life and in golf, but it's like, you got to really go out of your way to document it. So I recommend all my students, anyone that reads the book or goes to coaching with me, is that after each round, write down at least 3 to 5 good shots. You can find those even in the worst rounds. And so when I'm putting my yellow card together, I'm like, man, this is like a highlight reel, right? Like I'm able to really go back in. Obviously I play a lot of tournament golf, so that helps. But these, even if you're just playing casual rounds, you still have these good shots. And so I had one in this tournament. I think it was a hybrid from 250. It's kind of a hard shot. Like I said, I had a 6-shot lead. It went down to 1. I pulled out my card, and I remember this hybrid that I hit in one of the Arizona Golf major events, and it was like a 250-yard dart. Like, I couldn't hit a wedge that close. And sure enough, I looked at that, went through my routine, got up, hit it on the green, made birdie, and got back to a 2-shot lead. But it was like having that same on 18. 18's a 475-yard hole. I go back to 3 weeks before. I'm like, man, remember when you hit that driver? There was water both sides, 18th hole, you're clutch. And I remembered that. And it just got me in such a good space. And I really haven't even had to use the red card very much, knock on wood, because I've been able to learn and implement this stuff so much more. And so I recommend everyone carrying around a little hype reel, as I like to call it, for the yellow card, because I'm not a soccer guy, but the yellow card I thought was really good, and something that people can instantly use. And like you said, you don't have to kind of hopefully visualize the right thing, because it's easy to visualize the wrong thing too.
Yeah, look, if nothing, what you just said is such a powerful and simple thing for people to do. If they just walk off the course and just write down 2 or 3 of the, and everyone has at least one per round. At least one per round, you're like, whoa, where did that come from?
Right? There's always that one shot that keeps you coming back,
exactly,
right?
As the cliche goes, absolutely.
Yep.
But usually there are at least 2 or 3. And, I've gotten to a point, especially with my son, like, sometimes he'll hit a great shot and he'll look at me and say, hey, Dad, that's a yellow card shot. And what that means is that's going into my yellow card.
Oh, yeah.
And I tell people to change their yellow card as often as you can, because you want the most recent best shot.
Yes.
And so, but what you just said, I mean, how simple was it to just go in your yardage book? No one even knows what you're doing. They think that you're looking at your yardage book.
Yeah.
But you're feeding your brain something it really needs in that moment. Yeah. Now, it's not gonna, that's looking at that card and remembering that hybrid shot that you hit. It didn't change, your whole round, but it changed it long enough for you to execute that next shot. And that to me is the easier ask. Is, okay, while I'm preparing for my shot, so my pre-shot routine, while I'm over the shot and then I hit the shot, that's the moment I need to make sure that my brain is in green and I have a very good target, and I've done some type of a neurohack. In this case, your neurohack was to look at the card. Most people say, hey, breathe. And I'm a big fan of breathing too, but breathing, what I have found is it's a very good low yellow, high green hack.
Okay.
So it does help, but breathing when you're 80, 90 hertz that's like too high. You need something much more
Right.
powerful.
Okay.
And even though your brain waves might come down, it doesn't come down enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I think understanding what type of hacks to use. So that's why the red, green, yellow cards make it so simple for you. If you just make 3 cards and you put them in your yardage book, all you got to say is, where's my brain? If you're yellow, take out your yellow card. If you're red, take out your red card. If you're green, you want to stay green, and
Right.
do things that sort of keep you green.
Yeah, I love that system. It's easy for anyone of any handicap to apply. And like I said, I've had such real world results with it. I'm like excited to update my yellow card every time. So one thing too that I'm always curious about is, why does the brain remember all of our bad shots so much more than our good shots?
That's a great question. That's such a good question. And by the way, it's not just shots. So can I do a quick exercise with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So don't write this down. Just kind of hear me. All right. So I'm going to give you some numbers, right? And I only want you to think about the numbers I'm giving you. Got it? Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What are you thinking of?
Why'd you skip 5?
Why did I skip 5? Right. So just think about that. Here I was, just gave you a bunch of innocuous, non-threatening, not judgmental, just numbers, simple instructions, and your brain still went for what's missing. Our brain is designed to do that. So up until about 5 generations ago, most human beings did not travel more than 50 miles from where they were born. So the same threats, they didn't live past the age of about 40-ish. So survival was a big deal. 300-400 years ago, most of us died at birth or shortly after birth, right? So 200 years ago, our life expectancy was in the low 30s. Like we just didn't live long enough. So survival was a big deal for us. We had to remember the stuff that threatens us. Now today, in those days, it was a fire or a disease or, some,
Animal
war or animal. Yeah. But today in the brain, it's a missed putt. It's, a shot that you shanked or something like that.
So wouldn't that, so that's where I always get confused with this point, is like, wouldn't you want to forget that because that did trigger those responses that you don't want again? Or is it that it's your brain's like, hey, we got to be on high alert for those because we don't want that to happen again?
Yeah. So all trauma, I mean, bad shots are like micro trauma, and micro trauma leads to PTSD.
Some of them are macro trauma too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So the brain is just doing its job. And I don't know that we can rewire, 3-4 billion years of sort of design.
Yeah.
And so I think that the better answer is, can I just recognize, oh, I'm over this shot, and now my brain is thinking about something yellow or red. So I just did a session earlier today, actually, and I told, these golfers, I said, hey, after a tournament round, so you've played in not even a tournament round, a competitive round, and you have another round the next day or the day after, like one of the last things that you should do before you go to bed, now hear me out here, because some people want to throw stuff at me when I say this, is I actually want you to think about the worst shot of the day.
Okay.
Like, let's say that you just played 18 holes, and let's say that you shot even par, but on hole number 7, which is a par 3 over water, you duffed it and it went into the water. It was embarrassing. You made double bogey.
Okay? I just did that about 2 weeks ago. So, yep, fresh in my memory. Yep.
Right. So that night, before you go to bed, I actually want you to think about it, but not by itself. I want you to think, and hear me out. I want you to think about it and say, oh, okay, what really happened over that shot? Did I have a good target in my head? If I was distracted, what was I distracted by? Okay, what is the adjustment I should have made? Okay, and then go to bed. Now, most psychologists will say that's the worst thing you can do. Why would you conjure up a negative memory? And let me give you the best argument possible. Your brain's already going to do that. And you know when it's going to do it? Tomorrow when you're on the 7th tee box. Now, is that the time? Is that the time that you want to be processing that? So
That
do you
yeah,
know the
that makes
number,
so much sense.
do you know the number of tour guys that I work with that over 4 rounds of golf, they will have a bad score on the same hole every day,
Yeah.
right? Like on one hole out of 18, they'll be like 4 over, and the rest of the
Yeah.
holes, they're like 12 under.
I played
It's
a casual round yesterday on a course that I'm like, God, I always suck on this hole. Like,
There you
no
go.
matter what. Yeah. So
Because,
I
because
understand. Yeah,
the first
exactly.
time that your brain is processing that trauma is when you're in the tee box again.
But the problem is most of us try and bury those bad shots
Exactly.
and so then they're going to come back out when in reality you should just own it, be like, what happened, diagnose it, so that way it's not going to
Yes.
come back at you when you really don't want it.
Yes. There's no such thing
Oh, that's
as
huge.
there's no such thing as burying your thoughts. That's a cliche. That's as bad of a cliche as don't think about it.
Right.
I mean, there's no such thing as that, right? Your brain is constantly
Yeah.
thinking.
That's a perfect segue into my next question is why is the word don't so bad on the golf course?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not the one that has observed that. I think all of us and other psychologists have all noted that. So I want you to think about your subconscious brain and your conscious brain. So 85% of everything that you think is subconscious. By the time you're even aware of it, like most of the work has already been done. Okay. Now the word don't, right? Now think of what types of memories have to be retrieved to come up with the word don't. It's never a positive one, number one.
Oh,
Number
that's
two,
true. I never even thought about it from that
yeah.
sense. Okay.
Number two, it's not just a negative one, but a pretty severe negative one. So the word don't spikes your brainwave. So that's why, like, I just played at a pretty fancy golf course last weekend, and there were caddies, and I had a guy caddying for me, and then I don't know 3 or 4 holes. He asked me what I did, and suddenly he was, and the way that he was telling me it was, hey, you don't want to be left, you want to go there. And then I said to him, I said, dude, from now on, stop telling me where I don't need to be. Just tell me where I need to be.
Right.
And then I explained it to him, and he was like, oh man, I never thought about that. You are so right. And I said, just give me a better picture of exactly where you want my ball to go. Don't even tell me, don't be short, don't be long, don't be left, don't be right. You can say don't be left by saying we really want to be right here. And on the right side, you see that tree? Let's go there.
So focus on what you want more than what you don't want.
Yeah. And even if you subconsciously, if the word don't just shows up in your head, like acknowledge it and say, okay, I'm going to replace it with a much more powerful visual of what I want to do.
Yeah, I actually had a note of that, acknowledge and replace. I loved that because it's like, we'll have that don't hit it in the water. We're on the 18th hole. I'm playing good. Don't hit it in there. It's like, I always say it's okay to be like, yes, there is water left. Here's where we're focused on though. And it's like when you try, like you said, to burying thoughts don't work, saying don't, like it's okay, but then acknowledge it and replace it with what you do want the shot to have happen.
Yeah. Acknowledge and replace is something I personally use personally. I use it on Zoom calls. I use it in meetings because I never know when these crazy thoughts are just going to come into my head. And instead of fighting it or burying it, I say, okay, it's there. Let me replace it with what? With something in this moment that I want to do that can allow me to bring the best version of myself out. Like, I honest to God think that the best gift we can give ourselves, and especially those that we love, is our full attention. Right? And
yeah, 100%.
A big part of that is to acknowledge and replace the distracting thoughts that we have. The distracting thoughts aren't the problem. That doesn't make us flawed. It just makes us human. But to let those distracting thoughts percolate and fight them is the wrong approach. That's stealing gifts away. Acknowledge it.
A lot of us try and fight those thoughts though, right? Yeah, it's like you're not going to, it's a no-win battle.
Either that or we just feel really guilty about them. We have these thoughts and you're like, God, why did I think that? I mean, there are people in my life that I don't like. And sometimes like one of my relatives, my mother-in-law, for example, and, I have a thought that's not very nice about her. And, and it's a justified thought, but I shouldn't be having those thoughts. And so I feel guilty. Like, I'm a good guy. Like, why am I having this ill will thought about her? Like, dude, like,
Right.
you're a good guy. But acknowledge it and replace it. You know what? I'm alive. This food tastes so good. This cup of coffee tastes good. I have 1 year left with my son. Let me enjoy this moment. Like, we are stealing from ourselves these priceless moments of being human. And golf to me is a spa. There are trees, there are flowers. It's a walk. There are ponds, there are fountains, there are birds chirping, there are clouds up there. It's such an amazing spa, and the noise in our head keeps us from enjoying it. And I just, it's a gift to give ourselves, to go out there and activate our sensory organs, to play with our mind and say, yeah, I know my mind's going to be distracted. I know I'm going to hit poor shots, but man, let me go test and see how much of this round I can enjoy. And I get it. It's hard to enjoy, a hole after you've just made double bogey or something like that. But that's the real challenge. And like I said, we're experiencing such a finite journey. I mean, I'm old and I don't know how I got to be my age. I really don't. I don't know. I feel like I'm still a kid in my heart, and yet I have 2 kids that are in college now, soon to be. And like, how did that happen?
Right.
So it's a short life, and we've really got to enjoy moments. And I think the golf course is it's a nature spa. Like, even a muni that isn't well maintained is still outside. There's still old trees. There's still the smell of grass cut. There's still birds chirping out there. Just enjoy it. I really wish we could gift ourselves that amazing natural spa that every golf course is.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was one thing. I know we're running out of time, but I had to ask you about this, because this is paired with a GYR that I was using, or have been using, is that you mentioned in your book the 5 doors to the brain. And you just start talking about it. Golf is a spa, might be my new favorite metaphor. Explain how your senses can help you not only enjoy the day more, but actually help you play better.
Yeah. So, the biggest levers to the brain are stimuli, right? And all the stimuli that comes to us is through 5 doors only. It's not 50, it's not 500, it's just 5, and those are our senses. That's very manageable. 5 is a manageable number, right? In any context, almost. It's a very manageable number. And really, it's only 3, because the eyes and the feel and the sounds are really the most dominant ones. The taste, maybe not so much. But it's essentially 3, what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, what I'm hearing. And, once we say, I'm going to control what comes through those doors, we then control the noise in our head. In that movie, The Gladiator, the old saying is, win the crowd and you win your freedom. And I view the crowd as the noise in your head. And I think if you win the noise in your head, you win your freedom. In this case, the freedom is to enjoy the spa.
Love that. And so you recommend players to basically engage their senses more throughout the round to get more into that agnostic green-like state?
Absolutely. See more things, feel more things. I mean, the Buddhist, and I am not a Buddhist, but the Buddhist monk in Nepal and northern India, or even many parts of India, one of the practices that they do is they will sit in front of a tree for 4 to 6 hours, just one tree. And all they're trying to do with this one tree is to notice as many unique attributes about that tree. So cracks on the bark and the veins on a leaf, for example. And in the process of doing so, they're so engaged in that beautiful moment that, it feels like they took the deepest sleep of their life. And so on a golf course, you don't have to look at one tree. You can just look at, the colors on a tree. Like right now, it's fall. It's my favorite time of the year to play golf, because it's like a painting now. It's like a spa that's in a painting, because every day the leaves are sort of changing colors. But, engaging your senses in what is around you, hear the wind blowing, hear the birds chirping. I know that I am red when I don't hear the birds.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's my clue that, oh, I'm like, hey, I haven't heard a bird chirp in like, a few shots. Like, ooh,
Right.
that's no good. And then I'll close my eyes, and gosh, it is almost unheard of or super rare that you can be on a golf course and not hear a bird.
Yeah, I can just say from personal experience, I implemented that immediately, and I realized how much I didn't do that. I'm like, I've read so many books, podcasts, talked to people, but I've never ever thought about obviously you hear enjoy it and all these things, but like when I'm actively on the golf course in a tournament, I will, especially if I hit a bad shot or I'm waiting, like I'm looking and I'm trying to find different things and see different colors, hear different sounds, hear the cart path, hear the bird, hear the guy behind me hitting. Like I'm trying to, and I have noticed just how much calmer it has made me. And it's so simple.
Yeah, it is. It is. And like I said, it's, if you do the things that are in the book, golf can become cathartic. It can become a very meditative experience because every shot will present you the opportunity to make an adjustment, right? And that adjustment requires that you engage it. It's very similar than someone taking yoga. The pose in yoga presents you with an opportunity to hold your breath or hold your posture. And, post shot presents you an opportunity to say, can I be present? Can I recover from this? Can I control the thoughts in my head? We have to become the Jim Nantz of the noise in our head. We are commentators. Now they're bad commentators and they're good ones. And Jim is obviously, I don't know him, but hello friends. And like his voice is just
the best.
Like, it's the best. Like I would love to meet him at some point, but I love hello friends and, it's just calm and, but that's the texture of how our own thoughts should be. Is to make the commentary that we have of our experience to be as enjoyable, and it doesn't even matter what the experience is. When a guy duffs a ball on number 12 at Augusta, you don't see Jim Nantz saying, "God, that guy's an idiot," he sucks, and the way that he says it is in a nice way, even though it wasn't a good thing for that player, and that's what we have to do. Is we just have to be the Jim Nantz of our show.
Love it. Yeah, I'm going to write the hello friends on the top of my yellow card now. I love that. Before getting into my last question, what's the best place everyone can connect with you? I know you have a lot of books out there. Didn't even get into all your triathlons, which, by the way, you are an absolute stud. 40 of them. I did 2. I limped through the finish line. I mean, you're an absolute beast. So what's the best way to connect with you, to learn about all your different systems and all you're doing over there?
Yeah, so GYRAGolf.com, so GYRA Golf.com is probably the best way. On Twitter, I am at Izzy Justice. On Instagram, I'm at Dr. Izzy Justice. I am very, very, very particular about my social media content. I don't argue with anyone. I don't respond to any, negative stuff. I'm in the business of just making things positive, and I only put content out there that I feel is going to help someone. And I don't care whether it helps one person or a million people. And so I keep my content clean. I don't badmouth anybody, even though I may disagree with them. But, life's too short. And like I said, the mission really is to help people understand their brain so that they can enjoy this thing called life and be green.
And I can say, like, hands down, when I read your book and then I went on your social media, I legitimately watched every reel, like no joke, on your Instagram. And I've struggled out of bunkers, but my technique's there, my routine's there. I don't know what it was. You had one little video where you're like, imagine a little circle of like, do you want it high? Do you want it low? Do you want it medium? I have hit so many good bunker shots. And I didn't change anything about my technique. I just kind of tried to give my mind like, hey, this is a long bunker shot. It's going to be more low and kind of chunk and run. Hey, we're short-sighted. This is going to be high. And I just, like, when I'm in my routine, I look at that as the last thing, and then I just go. And so your free content's amazing. Your book's amazing. So, yeah, guys, follow him. We're going to include all the links down below. But, keep those up because I'm binge watching those too.
All right. Thank you for having me. Take care, Michael.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Dr. Justice.
Take care.